Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Fish Bites. So instead of staying up here and talking to you guys forever, I am going to talk about the fishing a little bit, what's happening right now, and some of the rigs I've been using, and some of the rigs I'm going to use as winter comes on. And then I'm just going to open it up to some questions. I feel like that usually works best at these kind of things. So, first of all, has anybody fished this week? I know Justin has. Fishing has been absolutely phenomenal this week. Been talking to everybody about it here. It's probably, especially the redfish fishing, probably the most redfish I've seen around in the last 15 years. It's been really good, really promising. It's been really just a lot of fun to be out fishing. The redfish are up really shallow, and as things cool down, that's kind of what I tend to focus on. A lot of really shallow fishing, but it's good everywhere. We've been catching a lot of black drum, a ton of trout, a bunch of sheep's head. I know a lot of guys around here like to sheep's head fish, and they're killing the sheep's head right now too. So, but back to the redfish. That's what I'm going to talk to you guys about. That's kind of my thing. Right now, or this week, with the weather being so nice, we've been able to sight fish for redfish. Who likes to sight fish for redfish? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my favorite thing to do. And when there's as many fish as there are around right now, it's pretty easy to do. It's pretty easy to find the fish. So I fished a lot in the north end of town this week. Right at the end of the tide, pretty much the last couple hours of outgoing tide, any little run out from any of the bigger flats or creeks was holding some redfish. So how many of you guys like to throw artificials? How about bait? Who's just a bait fisherman? Anybody? Yeah. So we caught them on both. I'm going to show you kind of my go-to. So this is my go-to bait right here, my go-to lure. This is a Fish Bites. It's one of their paddle tails. It's on one of their weedless weighted hooks. And the couple of reasons this works really well this time of year and then going through the winter time. First of all, it's a small bait. You know, as things cool down, the water gets clear. Water was pretty clear this week, but as it gets cooler, it's just going to get clearer and clearer. Hopefully it gets, don't get me wrong, I hate being cold, but the colder it gets, the clearer the water's going to get, and the better the sight fishing gets. So I hope we do get a little bit of that this year. But this is a small bait, so you can present it really nice and gentle, and that's important. You know, when the water's clear, the fish are going to be spooky, so you need something kind of small. Another thing is this will go through, it's not really rigged just right here. This will go through the oysters and the grass really easily. It won't get hung up. You know, when I take people fishing, I have people that are pro level fishermen all the way down to people that have never fished before. So, and this works great for all of them because maybe you're not super accurate with your cast. You throw it up in the grass, this will come right out. Same thing with the oysters. You throw it in the oysters, you can kind of, like Bree does this a lot. You throw it in the grass a lot, right? Yeah. So, but this is a great lure for that. Doesn't get hung up. The other thing that's great about this is that it's the color, the white color. So all through the winter, and I've got another one rigged up here too, but I like to use a light color, either white or chartreuse, you know, anything that I can see, because for me as a fishing guide or you as a fisherman, when you're sight fishing redfish, you want to know where your lure is at all times. You want to, when that fish is coming down the bank or coming along the edge of an oyster bar, you want to be able to see where your bait is in relation to the fish. If you cast it out there and you have a dark bait on there, our water is usually pretty dark, and you can't see where it is compared to in relation to the fish, you kind of lose track of it. So, especially me as a guide, when I'm up poling the boat or even when I'm on the bay boat up high, you can see these things much better. So, really, our redfish, I know some people think they eat certain colors better than others, but really it's more about getting the cast. Scott knows about it. What's up, Scott? Scott can make a cast. So that's another thing. Light colors all through the winter. I'm throwing white, chartreuse, anything that I can see. And the fish are going to be able to see it too. And then the third thing with this, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know, fish bites, it's a scented bait. So this week, beginning of this week, the fish were eating anything. We could have thrown one of those hot dogs out and we could have caught a redfish on it. But as the week went on, the fish got a little more pressured. They weren't eating quite as good. So that's where the scent comes into play. So instead of getting the reaction from the bait moving, you can throw this out and let it sit and the fish pick it up just like a cut piece of mullet or a cut piece of shrimp. So a lot of good stuff going on with this. This is pretty much always tied on in my boat from now through March. This is just my go-to. So another thing, and you can come up and check this out when I'm done if you want. This is kind of an old redfish tournament thing that we used to do. And it's really a live bait rig, but because of the scent with the fish bites, it works just as well with a shrimp, mullet, or a fish bite shrimp like this. And you can cast this a really long way. So what this setup is I'll do a really long leader. It's probably a 3 or 4 foot long leader. And then I use these big pinch weights. And the reason I like the pinch weights instead of like something you'd have to permanently tie on there is you can switch it up depending on how far you want to cast it and how much you want it to stay where you're putting it. But when I bust this out is when those fish get sensitive to, or they get a little spooky. You can literally cast this a mile, and you can throw this out in front of schools of redfish and just let it sit. It's probably the easiest rig going. It's kind of like a fish finder rig, I guess, but we've done really well in a lot of redfish tournaments using this rig. It looks not the coolest looking rig. It kind of looks pretty stupid really, but it's a great rig, catches a lot of fish, and especially with the fish bites on it. You just basically cast it out in front of the fish, let it sit. This is one of the Seaworks. Those guys are here. It's one of their circle hooks. I use their hooks all the time. It's a 3/0 circle hook. I don't know if anybody uses something like this, but it's probably my most used rig of anything I use. And you can also fish creek holes with it and whatever else. So, and it's easily adjustable. You can take these on and off. It also works well for trout. If you're in heavy current and that thing's bouncing along the bottom and this kind of floats, with no weight on it, trout like that as well. What's that? Yeah, jerk shad. I mean, a jerk shad works really well. We used to, when we did tournaments on the West Coast, that was like, I can't remember what we used to call that rig, but that was like, yeah, a green jerkbait, scented jerkbait from Fish Bites on this rig it's deadly, man. I mean, especially when you get those spooky fish, because a lot of times when you're using something like this and you swim it past them, they aren't gonna, they're being a little spooky, they aren't gonna eat it. But if you can get it way out in front of them with something like this and just let it sit and let the fish come to this, and this is just kind of, this is sitting on the bottom, and I'm talking pretty shallow water usually. And this just has a chance to kind of flow there if there's any current or anything. They tend to pick it up, sometimes when they're spooky. Yeah, so with this bait, I would actually, if I did this, I would probably trim this tail off just so it's a little more aerodynamic. But with this or a live shrimp, I always go through the tail. The heavier part is the head. So you want that on the end of the line, it'll cast better. I always do that with a live shrimp, but same thing with whatever, if you're doing this with the soft plastic, put the heavier end on the end there. Get it through the tail. The other thing is, who likes to throw topwater? I mean, that's probably my second, aside from sight fishing. There's so many different topwaters. This is one by Berkeley, but this is a great time of year for topwater fishing. If the tide's up tomorrow, I'll be out first thing when the tide's up. We'll throw the topwater for probably an hour and a half. I don't know what else I could really say about that other than it's another staple. If you don't know how to throw a topwater and walk the dog, learn it. It's super fun. I mean, it's probably the most fun way. The trout are absolutely destroying this thing right now. You shaking his head. Are you catching some trout on some topwaters? Yeah, so I fished up in Casacola at the beginning of the week. The tide was up. We threw topwaters. We probably caught 40 trout that one morning on topwaters. And some of them were pretty good. I'm serious, I wasn't lying. But yeah, so this, between now and pretty much until it gets pretty chilly out, topwater bait is my go-to if the tide is up. If the tide's low and I'm red fishing, I'm not going to throw this in real shallow water. If it's a couple feet deep, this is still kind of a go-to thing. But if it's any shallower than that, I'm going with the soft plastic. Has anybody been catching the sheep's head that's been going on? Oh, yeah, that's right. What, on fiddler crabs? Yeah. Okay. Nobody else? Nobody's been catching sheep's head? Yeah. So I'm not a big sheep's head guy, but I know when I'm catching sheep's head, I know it must be good because I'm not really a sheep's head guy, and we've been catching some big ones this week. So I was kind of looking near the bridges. Yeah, or docks. So we're catching them in creek holes right now. Anywhere where there's a creek hole with oysters in it, there's a lot of sheep's head. So the shops have pretty much will have fiddler crabs now through the winter. Definitely pick some up and give that a whirl.